Again, good evening, everyone. Scott Boone, Director of Public Works, and I welcome you tonight for the second PIM for the 2023 Street Improvement Project. I especially appreciate anyone that came out with the weather. I realize it's not the best night for this, but since it's always difficult to get things scheduled and then rescheduled, we figured it's best to hold this tonight. And then for those that can't make it, we're definitely not asking anyone to risk their life to be here. We definitely will meet with you, anyone that can't be here. So anyone that's listening to the recording, we'll definitely, if you have questions, let us know. We'll definitely be willing to meet with anybody to go through specific questions they may have. Some brief introductions, and not everybody on this list is here tonight, but I'll start here to my left. We've got Joe Skabinski. For those that were here the last time, I will otherwise highlight Joe. He's the project manager. He'll be the one kind of boots on the ground for construction. So he's kind of the first line of defense for anything that comes up once we get started. Getting to know Joe is probably a good thing if you have questions, because he's working with the contractor daily, so he can relate those concerns to you and deal with them as they come about. Unfortunately, for those that are listening to the recording, you can't see this, but then otherwise moving to my right, we've got Director of Utilities Joe Lemke, and then next to him we have Jason Pliska, who is one of the utility inspectors, and then Dan Wojcik, who's also a utility inspector. As Joe is for our public works to utilities, Jason and Dan are the boots on the ground there. So they're dealing with the contractor every day. If there's something that always comes up related to the utility aspect of things, as contractors are working and building the trenches and whatnot, and as work is progressing for that, because a large part of this is going to be the replacement of utilities within the roadway. They would be the two people to contact for that, to coordinate anything happening on the front end of the project as that's happening. Other people of interest that I have listed on here that fortunately are not here would be Todd Ernster, the city forester. Todd is a wonderful resource. I expect even outside of a project like that, use Todd if you otherwise can. If you have any tree questions, he's wonderful to work with. He loves his trees, and you can see it in how he approaches his work, and he's more than willing to help you out with any of your tree related issues. In addition to that, for this particular project, we do have a consultant on board with the weather. They're actually Strand Associates. They're down in Madison. So although they were willing to make the trip up here, I didn't want to I would have felt guilty if something would have happened to them, having them drive back and forth in the weather coming from that far. So I did just kind of ask them to just stay home for the day. But Pat Rank and Ty Wallen are our engineers with Strand related to this project. And lastly, I will point out is Ryan Karnowski with Community Development, who kind of helps us put together some of the planning documents there. I know there were a couple of questions after the last PM related to some of the improvements we have, which I'll get into in a little bit, primarily related to sidewalk. And Ryan is a very useful resource to that as far as how urban planning kind of plays into these projects that we otherwise do. And if you have any questions after this meeting, related to those sorts of things, definitely reach out to Ryan. I'm sure he'd be more than happy to help. Project limits. This map was otherwise included, I think, with the letter, the invite. Just shows what we're working with. Minnesota, Algoma, Texas is the limits of the project. Quarter history. I won't spend much time with this one. I did more so last time, but I think everyone agree. The pavement is in need of some replacement, and although we can't see it, utilities is well aware that the utilities are also probably in an equally similar position as far as age and deterioration. So it's the time to package this entire project together and do a complete reconstruction of the project, replacing both the buried utilities as well as addressing those elements at the surface. As far as what we're always trying to accomplish with this project, the city's goals, it is a replacement, as I just mentioned, kind of everything. This is a reconstruction project. The other major type of project that we have with the city is a resurfacing project, which really just deals with the pavement at the surface, and the utilities are untouched. In this particular case, we'll be working on both. So they will be replacing all of the water main, all of the sanitary sewer, all of the storm sewer, the sidewalks, curb gutter, the pavement. In addition to replacing what exists there today, we are looking to add some additional improvements, which is new sidewalk on Minnesota Avenue where it doesn't exist, as well as new curb gutter and sidewalk on the one block of Algoma Street, and new stormwater sewer in relation to Algoma and Texas there, where it doesn't exist currently today. Once we put the curb and gutter in, we need someplace for the water to go, so new storm sewer will be added there as well. Typical section, I apologize, this is a little bit light. Hopefully everyone can see it. For those that are here at the meeting tonight, there is a copy of this on, taped to the wall in the back if you want to look at it. But just identifies, this is pretty typical of what through, although there may be some slight variations between which corridor it is. The bottom there, identifies really what the final product that we're looking for will look like. So it will be, the paved road, curb gutter, there will be a terrace, and then sidewalk on both sides. A little bit on project schedule. So here we are today, the end of February, having PIM number 2. At this stage of design, since we've got what we consider to be near final plans, that's what we're presenting, are on the tables in the back, and we can talk about those a little bit later. So we've got a little bit of time yet as we try to put the final touches on those, which will incorporate comments that we received tonight into those, as well as just some of the staff comments. We had a discussion with the consultant this morning to go through some of those. And we're working here in the next couple of weeks to get those finalized and get those out to bid. The intent is to try to get an award, a bid opening sometime in later March or latest early April. Our target is to try to get council approval on the contract in April so that we have everything set up to go such that we can begin as soon as the weather allows us to here later in the spring. What we would anticipate, as I identified here on the schedule, sometime in that April, May, although it's difficult for us to exactly say because we don't control the other utilities there, those being telephone, power, gas, and such. But we would anticipate, typically they try to get out ahead of us if they can, but it's all part of their scheduling. So we'd probably see that sometime in April or May, as soon as the weather really allows to it. Then most likely they'll be showing up to do some of their utility relocates and some of their updates, even if there's nothing truly necessary for them to do. Sometimes there's relocations they need to do to accommodate us in the city's intentions and their design. Other times it's a matter of them just wanting to get out ahead of us to upgrade things because it saves them money, and ultimately as ratepayers saves all the ratepayers money because they don't have to worry about the restoration. They come in, they can replace what they have to and basically leave it in a state that's not quite what it was before, and we'll come in and do our work. So it's a nice relationship there to help them update their stuff too. They'll try to get out ahead of us. I would anticipate April, May. Again, I don't know exactly when that would be, and sometimes more so of late, it's kind of getting onto a little bit of concurrence with the project, although oftentimes they do like to. I think the preference is to get out before we start. That doesn't always happen. So if you see construction starting early on, like shortly after the snow melts and you haven't heard from the city about things and you're concerned about it, most likely it's not the city working towards a project, but it is some of the utilities doing work in advance of our contractor showing up. We would anticipate that the contractor would show up sometime in maybe late May or early June. Of course, the schedule yet to be seen once we have a contractor under contract. So we're probably looking to start sometime in there, call it that Memorial Day type area, weeks before, weeks after, somewhere in there. And then see, we'd probably wrap up sometime, with the entire project, in November, maybe if we're lucky, depending on weather or not, late October, but definitely in that early November timeframe. Project sequencing. This is the same slide I either showed the previous PIM, really just to illustrate the fact that we'll work with the contractor. We're trying to balance the idea between the disruption that construction itself has with getting the project completed in a timely manner. So depending upon how many crews that the contractor has available to actually be productive in work, we'll try to work with them to get as much done as we can. But we don't want to basically make it feel like everyone's being attacked from all directions. To do that, that wouldn't otherwise be a good thing. Even though we might get it done very quickly, is to try to balance it out. So we're working with them to see that, make sure that for each crew they have a reasonable amount of work, and then try to balance out any disruptions that others occur. Again, just to balance out the disruption versus the schedule and the ability to get this thing done as quickly as possible. And I just have several slides related to frequently asked questions. These were otherwise included with the invite letter. I've tried to kind of tailor a couple of these more so specifically, since generally the FAQs are related to all projects that we kind of apply out. These, in several cases, I tried to tailor a little bit more specific to this project. So of course, the first one is, will I be able to access my driveway? And throughout most of the project, the answer to that is yes. However, there will be times when you won't be able to get to your driveway, and we will be providing parking. In later correspondence, we'll identify areas where you can park. It will just be on-street parking, in adjacent areas that will otherwise lift any sort of restrictions there. So if it's legal parking now, we'll work to allow for parking within there. As far as how those durations may last during the utility phases of installation, it's pretty much kind of related to that point in time when they're installing utilities directly in front of your property, in front of your driveway. That may limit your ability to get in. As we move into the surface elements, then it becomes more so as fact of what they're doing. The actual road building is pretty minor, but when they get into the curb, gutter, the driveway approaches, the sidewalk, with all that concrete work, then the delay really becomes not so much, the work of setting it up, which is several days, but it's also the cure time for the concrete before it can be driven over. So we would expect when we get to that latter part of the project, there will be some fairly lengthy, delays. Joe, kind of estimate on that, if I can throw that at you.
Yeah, so once the concrete starts, you can expect a minimum of 3 weeks with no driveway access, probably longer. But the 3 to 5 weeks on that portion.
So we realize that that's an imposition, but it's just kind of the matter. They have to do things sequentially. We can't just put in all the concrete at once. So curb, gutter, sidewalk, the approach. As far as concrete are three separate pours. Each one has to cure and stuff before they move on to the next. So there's the setup time, pour time, cure time that has to be worked in. So it is a fairly lengthy process. The second question is, will we be assessed? Last time we otherwise met here, I'd identified I was presenting to City Council to not assess for any of the new stuff as identified in the slide here. What is assessable would be new curb and gutter, new storm sewer. The council otherwise agreed with me that what we're otherwise trying to do is work within the right of way to make the best improvements we can, which in this particular case in part is fitting in the sidewalk, which worked best when we added curb and gutter, not that it had to entirely be only curb and gutter. So relating it to that, agreed that seemed to be reasonable. So we're not anticipating any assessments for this project. So anyone who was concerned about that can rest assured should not be. The only assessment would be a special request to that. And Joe, I don't know if you want to just touch on the base or if that's sufficiently stated.
It's a lateral that may be needed for a property that isn't there now.
Yep. I know we had one that seemed very reasonable, one that seemed like it may or may not happen as far as a specific request for a stormwater lateral. That lateral would be assessed, but those are specific requests that we've received or inquiries we've received from property owners for those. But unless you're specifically requesting something, we would not anticipate any assessments on this project. One of the ones I really like to highlight on here, and I remember I did the last time too, is it's what if you yourself or if you know someone in the project that has a mobility impairment. Really, what we want to do is we want to hear from you on that. The earlier we can get started on that, we can try to get things formulated around that to present to our contractor to make sure that we're working on that. I know after last meeting we did have someone approach us with that, which is wonderful. We started thinking about how that otherwise would work into there. But yet it's still not too late if you have someone that you're concerned about as far as their need to get out. The kind of for example is, if you had someone, I think this was recently someone that had, I don't know if it was dialysis, but they had regular, I believe it was Tuesday or Wednesday morning doctor's appointments that they needed to get to. We worked with our contractor to make sure that regardless of what was otherwise going out, that Tuesday morning, whatever, that they were able to get out, that the vehicle was able to get there, and there was some means to get there. We just had them work around that schedule to make sure that it was available to them. And so even throughout that was one where we had, people, in that case, it was the son, coordinating with us pretty much weekly to confirm that those appointments were otherwise having and what time. and we would make sure that, it is. And we would definitely try to make any reasonable accommodations we can for anybody, that may not otherwise be able to get there. Because it is, when we recognize it, it's disruptive and can't get there when there's forms set up for sidewalk and you can't walk across it. You need to be able to get up. If you have a walker or a wheelchair, you're not going to be easily be able to do that. We want to make sure that we're addressing those needs in the community, that are impacted by this. So by all means, let us know, and we will work with that as best we can. What will happen with mail delivery throughout this project? Quite honestly, until we get real direction from the Postal Service, we don't know. Joe, I don't know, did you get anything more from them? Are we assuming temporary boxes?
Yeah, so the assumption is we're going to be using temporary mailboxes, at least for the section of Algoma where there is no curb and gutter. So if that is the case, your mailboxes will be removed, set on your property, and a temporary mailbox bank, which is just somewhere else within or near the project limits where there's 15, 20 mailboxes set up in a row, gets put together, and then that's where your mail will get delivered until the project is done, at which time the mailboxes will then be reinstalled at your property. But we're attempting to get a hold of the post office to talk to the new postmaster about that as well, to discuss with them to keep interruptions to mail delivery to a minimum.
Thanks, Joe. And then the one thing, regardless of how it happens, so if your mailbox isn't necessarily relocated or anything, the one thing we do want to always point out is that, I mentioned this last time as well, is that it is up to the mail carrier to decide whether it is safe to deliver your mail. So if, depending upon what activities are happening, near your home, they may choose not to deliver your mail that day. And unfortunately, we have no control over that. The intent is that they would show up the next day, and if they feel it's safe, they would deliver your mail on the next time around. So if you do have it, although we would like to know, there's very little we can do with it. If you have a concern over that, unfortunately, we just ask you to contact, please let us know, but you're going to have to work that out with the Postal Service, because really we can't control what they do. But keep in mind, just because you don't get your mail delivered in a day, which if you're like, man, I don't think I get mine every day anyways, it should be delivered the next time around. It seems like it's kind of come to that infrequent there, a couple times a week, absolutely. What about garbage and recycling? For this otherwise project, we consider that it will continue. If that should otherwise change and we need to change protocols, which is often then putting things into clear bags and setting them out, to do that, we will notify you when or if that's otherwise necessary to do so. It is potentially likely that it will happen, but we'll see as the project goes on, and as we get closer, as construction starts within your block or whatever, we'll send prior notice of any changes to the garbage and recycling protocol. Utility outages during construction, really there should be very minimal. I don't know if we want to otherwise talk here, because we will have temporary water set up for you, so there will be a short, very brief interruption there as that temporary water is being hooked up to that, but that will be coordinated with you on that. The sanitary sewer, the contractor will just continue to monitor and work with that as they do the installation. They kind of just do that as it's otherwise working. There shouldn't really realize anything, there. However, probably the biggest thing takeaway from that is if you do have an interruption to your service, your sewer isn't otherwise working, your water isn't, coming on when you turn the faucet on, and you haven't been giving any prior notice to anything otherwise happening, there's probably something going on, related to that, and you should contact the utility office right away, and they can come and take a look at that. Is that fair statement?
Yeah, and the biggest thing is you're gonna see these guys walking around out there the whole time, so if something doesn't seem right, just say it, even if we gotta say, no, that's normal, but we'd rather know what's going on so we can fix any problems that might be out there.
The next FAQ related to any improvements within the right of way. If you do have something there, so, such as a dog, electronic dog fence, irrigation system, private power, maybe to a light out at the driveway. We do ask you to remove those before our contractor comes through, and we have to always keep in mind that our contractor is going to come through with heavy equipment. So the relative amount of care that they're going to have to removing those things is going to be how much care they can use with an excavator, which is not much in those cases. So We don't want to take any responsibility as far as damage to those. If they're, if you're not concerned about, but if say you have an irrigation system that you haven't used, don't intend to use, we're not saying you have to remove it. You can leave it there, and it'll just be cut off with the bucket as they excavate through there, or removed. If you want it functioning at the end of the project, we will ask you to remove that out of there just to make sure that it's not damaged. To facilitate with that, what we will do prior to the beginning of construction is we will come out there and we'll mark the right-of-way line throughout the project. And even between now and then, if you have a question or concern about where that right-of-way is, just call the Public Works office, and we'll try to coordinate a time when we can get out there to help you out there and mark that even ahead of time. So if you've got some questions about whether something is or is not in the right-of-way, just let us know, and we will definitely work with you to help identify it. Trees. If you're like me, you really like your trees. So we also recognize that. We try to minimize the number of trees that we otherwise might remove in a project, but unfortunately at times it is just necessary to remove them. We can't always work with it to install the utilities, to put in all the curb, gutter, sidewalk. Sometimes there's just conflicts that we need to work around. We do have on the back wall, for those that are here, there's the demolition plan, identifies all the trees that have so far been marked for removal. So if you're concerned, you'll see those on the back wall there. If you have a tree of concern there, we are working with the forester on a few things there to make sure that he's comfortable with everything and his thoughts, especially to make sure that sometimes we might make an assumption that we can work close to a tree and work around it. And we want to make sure that the forester is comfortable with that, depending upon the species of the tree and whatnot. In his opinion, he may be saying we're doing more damage than he's comfortable with, and we don't want to do that. Definitely don't want to leave a problem in the future with a tree that's just going to slowly die over the next few years. So we'd rather just take that out now. But if you have a concern over a tree, especially if you look on the back wall there at those demolition plans, let us know, and we can always talk to the forester, Todd Ernster, and take a look at it. I can't make any promises to it, but we always willing to listen and take a look at any specific requests. Since we've got a contractor coming out here, the next question like that, can't they just do my driveway since they're already doing out at the road anyways? And unfortunately, the city just can't be that intermediate there to facilitate work on private property with our contractor. But to that extent, if you want to reach out, we don't have a contractor yet, but once we have that contractor identified, any property owner is more than welcome to reach out to the contractor. The city has to see if they're interested in doing any additional work. So we can't otherwise control that either. Some are more willing than others. What we typically find as far as a project like this is that to do some utility work, if you have a new lateral, you want to do new water service, new sanitary service, to do that, we would actually recommend you try to contract with some local plumber now and get it arranged there, and we can coordinate, have our contractor and staff to coordinate to do that on your end versus presenting that to them at the time, because that can be sometimes very difficult when they show up then to do that additional work. If you have, say, driveway type work, what we've otherwise found out is if you have an asphalt driveway, oftentimes really the only player in the municipal market really is American Asphalt. They typically have enough work. They're not interested in doing small little projects there. If you have a concrete driveway and you have work, or you're willing, if you have an asphalt driveway and you're willing to accept concrete, what we find is maybe somewhere around that 50-50 mark there is their concrete subcontractor may or may not be willing to do it. And oftentimes you find it's at least willing, worth asking the question. Again, no promises of that, but they may be willing to do that additional work for you since they're there. Oftentimes they don't find the additional work to be, that, say, cumbersome on their time, that they can finish up a project and get their crews to the next project they need to there, since they're already working there in the area. But again, that's for each contractor to decide. And I believe this is the last question, and this is something that often becomes not so much a question, say, the end of this summer when things are wrapping up, but becomes then the question next summer as things are greening back up again after the winter. And that is really related to who's responsible for the restoration after the project is complete. So it's important to understand is that the city can't otherwise afford to do it. The cost of actually truly establishing a new lawn is very costly, very time consuming. So what we others will have the contractor do is put in the topsoil, they'll put in some fertilizer, the seed, they'll put an e-matting over that to help protect it. And then after that, what we're otherwise looking to do is we're looking into the potential for adding some limited watering after the initial seeding. But at some point in time, that watering will stop, and we're asking for residents to then pick up on the watering and the mowing. With that, I can pretty much guarantee you the first thing you're going to see come up through that EMAT are going to be weeds. And that's not going to be related to the seed that the contractor put down. It's going to be related to the soil and the weed seed that's just inherently in the soil that's going to otherwise germinate given the opportunity to do so. But with proper mowing and proper watering, it is possible then to eliminate the weeds and get the grass to grow up. And so we're just asking for people to take that on, and do the watering, that kind of, as rule of thumb, 1 inch per week of watering, and then the timely mowings as it grows up. And it really may take the season, as far as that is next year, to get it done. But through that summer and stuff, we do believe just regular lawn maintenance that will establish a good healthy lawn for everybody. And as we get closer to the end of the project, we'll be sending out some stuff. We've worked with some of the local landscapers to try to put together a kind of a helpful sheet related to establishing that new lawn that we'll be sending out to everybody as we get to that part of the project. And so with that, we'll go to just kind of the general project related questions, and then we'll break to the back of the room here to talk about specific property related questions if you have any. Once we leave here tonight, the conversation really, I don't want it to end here. So if there are questions, concerns, comments, after you leave here tonight, by all means, reach out to us. So the screen now has the phone number, email for Public Works, phone number for utilities, as well as the Parks and Forestry. If you need to talk to Todd Ernster, by all means, reach out to us. That's that's what we're here for. And we definitely be willing to talk things through. If there's a concern there that needs a site visit, we're more than happy and more than willing to come out and take a look at something and talk it through with you to help make sure that we're all on the same page and that we understand your perspective, as well as hopefully then we can share ours and see that we can, at least if nothing else, understand each other. Maybe there's not much that the city can otherwise change there due to cost or whatnot, but at least we'll have an understanding then of what's going on. So by all means, reach out to us, ask questions. That's what we're there for. Even after tonight, even through construction, it's never really too late to ask a question. We'll try to come up with an answer for you that in a resolution as best we can.
This is one more opportunity just before we get into that. If you haven't had a home inspection yet, just know it's going to be one of these two guys doing it. And what we do is just try to make sure we have the best idea where your laterals lead the house, so that we design them in the best place. Because even though they are where they are now, something weird could have happened in the past. It's happened a lot on other projects. So we like to get in there, see the size, material, location. So if you've had an inspection, thank you. If you haven't, please call us and schedule one, because it's going to prevent us from making errors during construction. So Dan and Jason are the two guys doing that.
So, all right. So with that, I'm going to turn off the recording portion of it here, and I thank those that are watching on the recording. And we'll put a summary of the questions that are always asked there in a written format. I find that's easier to just search through for people. So we'll have a record of the questions asked next, and we'll go to that. So thank you.